Hello, it's Paul, and as ever, it's
Megan.
And today, it's the Green Edition, Energy Efficiency. We have Michelle from Snugg.
Yes, we're talking all about retrofitting,
Yeah.
what that means. We basically touch on the importance for energy efficiency in homes and how that what part that plays in reaching net zero by 2045.
That's correct, and we had a bit of a rule for the episode: keep it jargon free, keep it simple. So we do talk at the start about things like energy performance certificates, and we also touch on the new bill, the Heating and Buildings Bill, and what it could mean for you as a homeowner or a landlord. So we think you'll enjoy it. Here we go, here's the show. So hello, we've got Michelle from Snugg. I'll ask you to introduce yourself in a second, Michelle. We're going to talk about all things energy efficiency and green today. So hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. So I'm Michelle. I look after business development for Snugg. So we're an Edinburgh-based fintech startup, and our mission is all around simplifying the journey to more energy efficient and sustainable homes at scale. So we're looking to reach the masses with energy efficiency effectively.
And it starts today by reaching the masses with our podcast.
Exactly. And I said that we're a fintech, and people are often like, what, fintech property? That doesn't make sense. So just to explain, so the reason that we're a fintech is that our main route to market is through mortgage lenders. So they have a massive interest in home energy efficiency because their mortgage book is effectively a scope 3 emission. So within their transition plans, they've committed to reducing their emissions across the board. So they effectively need their mortgage customers to reduce their emissions from their property as well. So there's a vested interest from the banks and the mortgage providers.
So I thought what we would do first off, because we carried out some market research at the ESPC, and we were just chatting about that before the show. And I just thought we'd share this because I think I'm mindful today as we get into this that there's probably a number of people out there that really aren't aware much about this sort of topic. So this is an educational piece, and we've said we'll try and keep this jargon free as best we can to keep us right. We did 500 homeowners. We asked them the questions. 50% weren't aware of either what their EPC rating was or even what an EPC is. Do you want to just explain what an EPC is in the first instance then?
Yeah, sure. So in the interest of jargon-free, the acronym EPC means Energy Performance Certificate. So it's effectively a grading around how energy efficient your home is. So A would be the most energy efficient, going all the way down to G. So it's a scaled system. And it's quite often just available within the home report when you're buying a home. How prominent it is within that is subject for discussion. Quite often it isn't the most,
more people are seeking them out.
Yeah,
to our research.
Yeah,
to look at them.
Yeah, starting to think about it. I think that's because of the cost implications of
Absolutely.
Energy bills. You've got to think, people are stretching themselves more on the mortgage front, and you have to think about the running costs. So the more energy efficient it is, effectively, the cheaper your energy bills will be.
And I think it also talks about the potential of what you might be able to get your rating to.
Yes.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about some of those measures we can take soon. In fact, interesting enough, in some other survey I read, 90% of homeowners have done something in terms of energy efficiency. Majority have been changing light bulbs. You can't get the old light bulbs anyway, so but there have been other things like window insulation, all practical things, probably all as a driver, because we've seen the cost of energy go up, as we know. So, the other stat I would just put in there: 73% of the public not aware of the government's plans about sort of some of the things that they're going to bring in, going to make mandatory. So I'm wondering that's probably a good place to start, Michelle. We've spoken many a time about this, that the government's looking to reduce emissions. We've got the net zero commitment by 2045. We know housing is a big contributor to emissions. Yeah, do you want to maybe just elaborate a little bit, because there's a bill that's going through at the moment, isn't there? The Heating and Buildings Bill, and there's some potentially key things in there that could change things.
Yeah, so generally awareness is pretty low. So CO2 emissions from our homes within Scotland accounts for 15% of the country's total emissions, so it's quite a big chunk. I think if you think about where we're at in terms of our general awareness, we all kind of check ourselves now before we use the car. Maybe we're like, actually, is this the right thing to be doing by the environment? Maybe we should use public transport or walk. We don't really have that same awareness of the relationship between hitting the boosting on the heating and the CO2 emissions that we're emitting from our house and not doing the right thing by the environment. So I think you're right that awareness is pretty low across the board. We don't really have that connection at the moment between the heating and the environmental impact. The Heating Buildings Bill is consultation that the Scottish Government are running with various different initiatives to try and address that. One of the challenges with the awareness is that the kind of policy landscape is changing a lot. So how do you tell the masses when we're not quite sure what the message is? But I think the main thing to know is that changes will be coming in this space, and the more that you could be ahead of them and start to think about the energy efficiency for your own property, then the better.
I think you're right, and a lot of the bill talks about clean heating systems, which we'll just come on to, and I think in reality what we will see, whether or not we get a deadline date on it or if it's just a carrot before we get the stick, that there is a view that we need to move away from things like gas-fired central heating boilers into new clean heating systems. Do you want to maybe talk about what those clean heating systems might be? And interesting enough, because I think we were having a stat off there, weren't we? You were saying about your own stat about the number of homes that are currently have gas and have gas central heating. It's quite high, isn't it?
Yeah, so in Scotland, in urban areas, 89% of, is it 89?
Yep.
Yeah, 89% of dwellings in urban areas are using gas for their main source of central heating. It's a pretty high percentage. So in terms of low carbon alternatives, you're effectively looking at heat pumps, so air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps. There's talk of district heating networks that might be able to support areas like Edinburgh, where there's more of kind of concentrated properties within flats.
I mean, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? So you see that in Europe, and there are some developments already, I think, on the outskirts of Edinburgh where there is a district heating system in place. So you're getting it from a central source and you put in your heating, and there it is.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think there's a development, is it in Shawfair, there's a new build development with and I think the thing to remember is that with adopting these new technologies, at some point in time gas boilers were new as well. So whilst we're all really used to the concept of gas boiler for central heating, that change was made. And we just need to make the next iteration of that. I saw a funny presentation actually of someone who said they were recruited by one of the gas companies to go over to Northern Ireland to offer gas boilers for free when they were rolling out the gas boilers. And he came back and said, I need a sales team. And the guy was like, you're giving them away for free. Why do you need a sales team? No one wants them. And there is that kind of requirement to convince people of new technology to take them on board. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And when we talk about, we'll get into it in a moment in terms of the, let's say the clean heating systems. Also, it's not just doing the heating system, isn't it? Because there's fabric first approaches doing other things to the building, isn't it?
Yep.
Megan, we're hogging the limelight. Is there any questions you wanted to ask there? Because I feel like we've statted each other off.
Well, I guess we're obviously hammering home the point that this is a big deal, and it's not enough people know about it. But what are the kind of advantages of being an early adopter of this kind of technology?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, that's a good question. So at the moment, there's quite a lot of government grants to incentivise people to start thinking about alternative heating systems. So I guess the benefit of being the early adopter is that you can jump on board of those government grants, and there's the kind of I can't quite think of the word, but you get to you can be the one that's making the change right early on, and doing the right thing by the environment. There's a lot of people who've spoken of the satisfaction of being able to disconnect mains gas from their property, having completed their full house retrofit or energy efficiency projects. There is the challenge of the kind of running costs if you're moving to an electricity heating system. So that there is quite a lot of change and innovation still happening with things like tariffs, so that it's cheaper to run heat pumps. And there's quite a lot of organisations lobbying to reduce the cost of running low carbon heating systems on electric in the short term to try and incentivise people.
I think we're going to see that, because at the moment gas, let's be honest about this, gas is cheaper, but I think we're going to see that sort of pivot, aren't we? It's going to go the other way.
Definitely.
Likewise with energy performance certificates, there will be a change where the report will reflect that if you're using a clean heating system, whereas at the moment it doesn't, but it will in the future.
Yeah, definitely. But if you were even erring on the side of caution with some of the newer technologies, one thing that is a bit of a no-brainer is insulating better, making sure that you're draft proofing. Some of these kind of ticket items just to make sure that when you are heating the property, the heat stays in the property and you're not losing, the money that you've spent to heat it, on drafty areas of the home.
So I guess what we're talking about is, you mentioned the word retrofit, just in case anyone is thinking, what's retrofit mean? What does retrofit mean? And is there some people who should be retrofitting before others, or is it just whoever wants to optimize their home first? Is there things that take longer than others?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, because I live in a relatively new build flat, I'm probably not somebody who needs to be at the front of the queue for getting a lot of energy efficiency things. But I'm sure there is that I have a gas boiler, so
yeah,
I'm not perfect.
But the insulation in your place compared to maybe a 70s flat, without disrespecting the 70s flat, it would be significantly different.
Yeah.
We were talking, weren't we, the other week when we were saying about it was cold, and you were saying how snug it wasn't, no pun intended, how snug it was in your flat, in comparison to...
Yeah, we really only have to put the heating on really when it's really, really cold outside.
Yeah.
But, let's go back. So what is retrofitting first before we...
The term retrofit is effectively undertaking improvements to the energy efficiency of the property. And it can happen organically. Within the retrofit space, a lot of focus is put on the cost of doing the works versus the return that you get in terms of the energy saving bills and so on. But when you look at it a little bit more broadly in terms of the home improvement market and the money that people spend just on improving where they live, it's a slightly different situation in terms of the cost benefit analysis. So some of this stuff is happening, organically. We are just, you might be replacing the windows because you don't like the look of them, and actually you're replacing them with a much more energy efficient alternative. So that would be one measure that you might want to think about in a retrofit project. So it's essentially just all around improving the energy efficiency of the home, and that's the core purpose of the retrofit activity.
And some people might be saying that sounds quite expensive. Is there anything that the banks are doing, or with regards to financing? I know you mentioned that there's some government schemes as well.
Yeah, so there's the government schemes. The role so with Snugg, because as I mentioned, our main route to market is through the mortgage lenders, and the reason for that is that the banks are incentivizing people to do more around the energy efficiency of their home. So that could include things like a cashback incentive if you make specific improvements to your home, maybe install solar, then there might be a cashback available. They're also offering green finance products on low interest rate as long as the money is being spent towards energy efficiency measures. And the banks are really innovating in terms of the type of financial products that they're putting out there. So if you are thinking about undertaking any of the bigger ticket items like solar, heat pumps, windows, that type of thing, it is definitely worth looking at the government grants that might be available to you, and also whether or not your bank or your mortgage provider are offering any incentives as well.
And in terms of trying to work out what you should do in the order that you should do the things, as Megan described there, this isn't a plug for Snugg, but that's something that you would give advice
so
on?
So on Snugg, you just put in your postcode, and then we actually do just initially present back a home profile, so just there, and then you can see the most recent EPC, which is quite useful if you can't dig out that old.
You know what it is.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing is you can, quite often an EPC might be out of date. If you've made changes to your home and not had a new EPC, then you wouldn't know what the new one is. So you can update anything that you have already done to get a better understanding of where you are currently. And then we basically present back a personalised home improvement plan. So we would list a series of measures that would be relevant to your property that we would recommend that you learn more about. And then you can have a play around with, what budget you might have a think about whether that might be something that you're wanting to do a little bit later down the line, but you just want to start with the smaller measures, the light bulbs, and so on. So we build that home improvement plan as a digital starting point just to get people started. You can always engage with a retrofit advisor as well if you wanted to someone, if you've got particularly complicated property that's had lots of extensions, or a property that's really, really old and has got complexities to it, maybe it's a listed building, then there are specialists who can come out and do a full assessment of your house.
That's interesting. I noticed that, again, one of the things we might see There's been lots of talk about that. The date's been put back a few times, is a minimum standard to let your property. Potentially that's going to be a C, but we think even the way they calculate the energy performance certificate is going to change, but it will be a standard, probably a C. We think half the current stock is below a C, so that there'll certainly be work to do there, we think.
Yeah, definitely. And coming back to the Scottish Government's Heating Buildings Bill, the proposed, nothing's set in stone by any means at the moment, but the proposals within that bill were as soon as 2028. So the UK government for England and Wales are talking about 2030. So those kind of landlord requirements do look like they're going to be on the horizon. And with benefits to tenants, it will reduce the running costs for the tenants to heat the property.
And we think people are going to make more informed decisions about what type of property they buy in the future based on, it's going to become more increasingly important. We see it now with cost of energy, and I think that's going to continue. Maybe there's taxation around energy efficiency in the future. Who knows? But change is here really, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. It will be really interesting to see. We do a kind of calculation within the tools, so the estimated house value impact of completing works and implementing your plan. But you can definitely foresee a time when the kind of curb appeal of big expensive properties that you pay a premium on for the moment, people will think a little bit more around the longer running costs and the improvements that are needed of those properties, and there'll be a bit of a levelling out between the newer properties and those kind of period features.
Or I think, as you say, those sort of retrofitted ones. And it's interesting when you get those thermal imaging cameras, isn't it? When you put them up and you see where all the heat's coming out of your house. Like it's normally around the windows.
Windows, and the challenge is with some of the older properties that some of these, it's not that easy to replace windows for or it's very expensive to get like for like that do have the improved efficiency. So
because we know that's a big thing in the centre of Edinburgh as well, because there's a lot of listed properties here, so that's I guess another obstacle you've got to get around.
That's going to be a big challenge, and I think when we gave our own feedback to government, we were saying this. I think there needs to be common sense applied, and clearly we can't have anything crass done to properties, because the whole beauty of Edinburgh is in the type of property. That's definitely a consideration, and the economic consideration. Spending £100,000 retrofitting on a property worth 250 grand probably isn't going to happen. So, there has to be an element of common sense, but, that net zero promise is there, has to be achieved. So things are going to change.
And I think one of the points that we'll see the speed of change increasing is when new build properties are starting to adopt these technologies. We are still, as a country, building properties at the moment that are going into gas. I think that's next year.
It's now, I think.
Yeah.
I think you're right. 2024. I don't think you can now build unless it's already been through the application. I think now onwards.
Yes.
You're building
And so as people are moving into properties with these alternative heating systems, they will become more commonplace. There's more of that kind of lived experience, and that will then have a knock-on effect to neighbouring communities.
The cost should come down as it becomes more popular.
Definitely.
Again, it's probably as well just do your research thing, because there will be district heating potentially in some locations, and best you find that out early, I think, before you do anything, just to see.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that, if we could get to a point of knowing what is planned for each different area, then if we could notify users that actually, a heat network might be coming to your area, just focus on your fabric furnishings, your insulation and similar, then there would be huge benefit to that. The local councils have started working on their LHES strategies that have started to map out some of those areas, but again, it's not 100% sure exactly what authority the council has to implement them and put that into more concrete plans at the moment.
Government's keen though.
Yes.
Very keen.
Yeah.
And we look forward to the roadworks. We thought the trams were bad. But this is the pain barrier we've got to get through, isn't it? We'll get through all this, and somebody in 2050 is going to be sitting there thinking, those poor people back in the day that went through all this. But that's change, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's how we
absolutely.
have to, we have to transition, we have to move across.
Yeah, but it's the adoption curve. We're just at the very bottom before we get to the masses at the moment. And we will get there.
Well, this is all part of it, this chat today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's everything that I had written down.
Yeah, Michelle, is there anything you'd like to add? Yeah. Any other comments?
The only thing that I'd add is that it's one of these things that once you realise the scale of the problem, it can be a little bit overwhelming when you think, okay, so I'm not doing right by the environment by using my heating loads, but then we don't just want to instill fear and panic in people. And so I think what you're saying is that we want to have that measured approach. But if you're thinking, well, how can I get started with my own home? The best thing that you can do is just learn more about where you are now and where you could potentially get to. So that's just reviewing your EPC rating at the moment and thinking about what measures might be relevant to your property. Then go down the route of exploring your finance options, check for grants, check with your mortgage provider, other alternatives, and then you just want to make sure that when you're engaging with installers, you're doing all your normal due diligence, getting 3 quotes, going by word of mouth, checking people have got all the necessary regulations and accreditations so that you're going to get a good job. And then hopefully you'll see the benefit with, reduced bills, more comfortable property to live in, and then ultimately those reduced CO2 emissions.
Yeah, I'd completely echo that point about making sure you use the right contractors for the work. In fact, it's on the government site now saying there'll be a register and there'll be a standard. And I think that's so important because in an emerging industry, you could see how people could be in it for a quick buck and they won't be here in 3 years, but they've, not done the work to the appropriate standard.
Definitely. And with some of the government grants, they're available specifically to people in lower income households. And you might be entitled to them, but just be cautious if there are people approaching you selling that, then just be really careful about, what their skill set is like. Make sure that you're looking at alternatives and don't get ambushed into installing something. Make sure you do the right thing by you and your home, definitely.
Absolutely. And we intend to do a lot more on this subject because we see there's as we just started at the start of the show there's a big education piece on this.
Absolutely.
And, we'll be doing events and the like in the future. So, if you're listening, you want to get involved, you come in and ask us questions. We'd be happy to help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for coming to chat with us.
Thank you.
And if anyone wants to find out more about Snugg, where can they go?
Just snugg.com. So if you go onto the website there, you can build your own free personalised home improvement plan.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Great
Thank
to see you.
you.
Okay, we hope you enjoyed that. As I say, today was really about it being an educational piece, and I learnt a bit.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Hopefully you did as well. And now, I guess what a good thing is if you're also browsing for properties on ESPC.com, you can then go and plug the property details into Snugg, and then you can potentially see how you can make that property even more energy efficient. That's
a good shout, yeah. So you'll find the energy rating on the individual properties on ESPC.com, and as I say, you can then go and tinker around with it on Snugg and see what you get. But this, as I say, very much an educational piece. Michelle knows a good stat when she sees one. 89% of people living in a home with gas-fired central heating.
In urban.
So change is going to come. This won't be the last that we talk about this on the show. It won't be the last that we don't. We'll do events on this, and there'll be more pieces coming out on ESPC.com all the time. But we hope you enjoyed today. Thanks as ever for your support.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week.
Take care.
Bye.